Are you pro-EU? Do you love the free market? Is your daddy gonna sue me for making this video? Then boy, do I have a party for you! Fine Gael are one of the only two parties who've ever been the majority in government. They've been in power since 2011 and are more or less responsible for the recovery from the 2008 crash. Or were in power during the recovery. Whichever you prefer, arguments about that are pretty complicated. During this time in office, Fine Gael oversaw a number of referendums. Most of these are pretty boring, but the two big ones are gay marriage and abortion. Fine Gael, along with all of the major parties, supported gay marriage in 2015, and in 2018, Fine Gael more or less supported abortion. Nearly everybody in their party voted in favour. The biggest supporter base for Fine Gael has historically been middle-class dubs and urbanites in general. This can be contrasted with their main rival Fianna Fáil, whose supporters tend to be more rural, going by the 2016 general election map. Kind of. Ish. Okay, in reality, nobody knows who votes for Fine Gael. It's pretty hard to tell. I mean, if I voted Fine Gael, I probably wouldn't admit it either. Figuring out the divide between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil isn't easy, because for the most part, they're very similar parties who agree with each other. The reason that these two parties are so similar is probably because their divide isn't based on ideology, but more on what side of the Irish Civil War they were on. Historically, a lot of families in Ireland were always Fine Gael families, or Fianna Fáil families, because of who their dad, or their granddad, or their great-granddad fought with. You wouldn't think a 100-year-old grudge would be a good basis for a political system, but it seems to work. Well, for the two parties anyway. In terms of policies, Fine Gael are generally pretty anti-interventionist when it comes to markets, with Leo Varadkar being the neoliberal mascot of Ireland. In the 2000s, they proposed funding a stimulus package by selling off various state resources, including electricity generation services. Speaking of neoliberalism, Fine Gael are also super pro-EU. They support the Lisbon Treaty and the proposal of a European constitution, and they support Irish participation in European common defence. Time for the elephant in the room. Housing and homelessness. The biggest criticism of Fine Gael is the poor situation in regards to homelessness and housing costs. The full reason for these crises is beyond the scope of this video, but here's what one Fine Gael voter had to say.
Don't even worry about it, man. I've totally figured it out. We'll just get all the homeless to buy homes. It's easy, man. Or they can totally do what I did and work super hard for your position in my daddy's law firm.
Aloysius Finnegan was unavailable for further comment. Homelessness doesn't seem to be well understood by Fine Gael. In 2013, they made a rather unfortunate promise. They claimed they would eradicate rough sleeping by 2016. Since 2016, about 45 to 50,000 new houses have been built, and around 2,000 units of social housing, which is great, but the number of homeless families have risen by 216% since 2015. Fine Gael aren't known for being friends of the homeless, and this was particularly exemplified in January 2020, when an election poster for the Minister for Housing overlooked an incident with a homeless man. Now, normally, if you want someone to move out of the way or to move their tent, you might ask them to do so. But in this case, it was decided to just remove the tent with an industrial vehicle with the homeless man inside who sustained life-changing injuries. This event really brought the homeless crisis to the forefront of the general election. Beyond this, in 2019, a UN report declared that housing in Ireland was unaffordable. Varadkar had this to say. What do you mean our housing policy is contrary to international human rights obligations? What do you mean we are failing to protect against human rights abuses by business enterprises? Just stop being poor, you absolute gobshite. Young Fine Gael, also known as the biggest gathering of virgins since my 17th birthday party, have frequently been mired in controversy. There were calls for the Young Fine Gael president to resign in 2019 after he attended the Young America Foundation's annual conference with Mike, Gay People Are the Devil, Pence. It was an interesting decision considering Varadkar himself is gay. Then again, Varadkar hasn't historically been the most woke person on earth. In 2010, he opposed gay people being allowed to adopt children.
The issue is also going to arise in relation to adoption. And this is going to be a difficult question, and it isn't dealt with in this bill, it's ignored in this bill. And I understand why that is, because it's contentious, but sooner or later it's going to have to be addressed. My view on this is simple. Every child has a father and a mother. Two men cannot have a child, two women cannot have a child, and a single person cannot have a child on their own unless they procure the products, the pre-products of conception from an alternative source.
This may come as a surprise, but I'm not the world's biggest fan of Fine Gael. That being said, they probably do get more flack than they deserve. Not by much, but it's something. They're handling Brexit pretty well. They're not doing the worst in the world with the coronavirus, and the Irish economy really did get its feet under itself with them. Considering they inherited a country whose economy wasn't strong enough to pay off its debts and managed to increase the GDP of the country to the point where it's the fastest growing in Europe, they might deserve some credit. That being said, housing just seems like such an afterthought for them that to say they even pay it lip service might be a bit of a stretch. Fine Gael, an upper middle class party with a slightly progressive aftertaste. 4 coalition governments out of 10.